What is the most messed up way you got back at someone who wronged you? Part 2.
Experience 1. Too late to the thread, but I'll share a story my dad told me about. My dad used to live in an apartment building with assigned parking, as in every tenant had a designated space that only they were allowed to park in. Well, my dad would regularly come home to find someone else parked in his spot. He had asked the guy politely several times not to park in his spot and had even talked to the landlords who had done nothing about it. So one day he got home to find the guy parked in his spot again and decided enough was enough. My dad had always worked on cars, ever since he was 13. He had a jack in his trunk and used that to jack the guy's car up off its rear tires. It was a rear-wheel drive car, which meant my dad now had control of the car. Using the jack, he pulled the car across the lot and left it somewhat hidden behind a dumpster. Then he let the car down, put away his jack, parked in his spot, and went up to his apartment. Later that day he got a knock on his door. It was a police officer with an inconsiderate neighbor behind him. The officer asked my dad what he had done with the neighbor's car, and my dad looked him right in the eye and said, "He parked in my spot, and I've asked him several times not to do so, so I lifted his car and set it over by the dumpster." Now, to give you an idea about my dad, he's 6 feet 5 inches, and back in the day was really well built. He also has only one eye, and the fake one he's got has always been too small, giving him a constant madman look. When he told the officer that he'd lifted the car and moved it himself and even pointed out where the car was through his apartment window, the police officer's eyes got as big as dinner plates. He turned to the neighbor and said, "Sir, I recommend you never park in this man's spot again." The guy stopped parking in my dad's spot after that. Experience 2. My friend pulled a fairly innocent prank on me. To pay him back, as we got to a very busy airport to fly to Vegas, I put a lead-lined bag, used to protect film going through the X-ray machine, in his carry-on. They had to check his bag right there. In it I put a dildo and a tube of anal-ease lubricant, a loose deck of naked men playing cards, and dozens of extra small condoms. He of course looked horrified, pleading that it wasn't his, which it wasn't, but no one believed him. They put everything back laughing and he was allowed through. Experience 3. My girlfriend of 3 years, whom I dated through high school, broke up with me during my first semester of college. We went to different schools, and I later learned she was hooking up with one of her guy friends there. Anyway, when we both were on break, she asked me to bring back all the stuff she had given me, presents, sweatshirts, cards, etc., so I drove to her house with all the things we'd exchanged in the past 3 years. Once I got to her house, I saw that she had invited all her friends over and they were sitting with her along with her parents in the garage. Anyways, I walk up with her crap and exchange. Everyone there had that smirk on their face like they were laughing at me. Anyway, as I gave her back her things, I said, "If only I could give back your virginity." The look on her parents' faces was absolutely priceless, and I walked out of that lion's den with the biggest smile on my face. Experience 4. In 2009, I deployed for a 6-month tour to the Helmand province in Afghanistan, running at least weekly missions from Leatherneck to Nowzad. We were the only unit that would run that route in the entire AO. It was that bad. A month into the deployment, I was just getting 6 months into my first real relationship. It was a long distance, as I was stationed in NC, and she lived back home in New Year. We were planning on getting married, but my staff sergeant gave me a little speech and I decided that it was best to wait until after the deployment. She was already cheating on me 4 months into the relationship. I took it hard. And that's all I thought about for 6 months while I waited to get back home. I had a bunch of her stuff, and she had some of mine. I never got any of my stuff back, but she had given me this tiny little dancer trinket to wear on my dog tags. Her mother had given it to her before she ran off, so it had some sentimental value to her. Oh, and 5 months into my deployment, her new level 3 sex offender boyfriend who she left me for goes back to prison for probation violation. I get a message over Facebook that she just found out she's 6 months pregnant, and it's mine. There's no way you just find out you're 6 months pregnant when you weigh 110 pounds soaking wet. It was a sham to get me back. There was no pregnancy. 6 months later, I arrived back home. I go into the subway where she works and lo and behold, she's working. I walk in and she goes,
"Welcome to Sue,"
and cuts off mid-sentence as she sees me with a look of absolute horror on her face. I walk in, walk up to the counter, look her dead in the eyes, set the dancer trinket on the counter, shake my head, and turn around and walk out. I could hear her start crying before I got to the door. I'm much more successful out of the military. I have a great job, an amazing girlfriend, and a sweet townhome. I'm about to get a dog here soon. I've never blocked her on Facebook, I just don't see her updates in my news feed. She'll poke me every once in a while, but I never poke back. It's nice to know that she can watch me be successful without her, and I know her life is in shambles. About once a year, she tries to message me and ask me how I'm doing, but it usually ends with her going on some depressing rant about how she screwed up and wishes she never cheated on me and left me. Experience 5. I had a loud-ass apartment neighbor who was always causing problems. My wife got fed up one night when he and his drunk friends were wrestling in the parking lot while making a ton of noise and called the cops. This was an angry drunk Mexican who decided to retaliate for the cops getting called by breaking my antenna off my car as soon as the cops left. I fumed about the antenna for a week or so when the dick came back home drunk again at 6 a.m. again, waking me up as he thundered up the stairs. It wasn't until a couple of hours later we noticed he left his keys at the door of his apartment. I snuck up the stairs and took his keys right out of the lock and chucked them in a ditch a block away. The best part was hearing him storm around tearing his place up looking for them. You could hear the prick moving furniture and crap. His truck had 2 separate alarms, and after he lost his remotes, he had to replace both of them. I regret nothing. Experience 6. I went to school with someone who was a real dick. He bullied me a substantial amount and eventually, I got fed up with it. One day when we were in the library, I saw him log on. As he went to access his emails, I snuck a look at the keyboard and noticed his password. Lo and behold, the idiot used his name and a number, and that was it. Cue creeper time. When I went home, I had a quick look through his emails. I noticed a rather interesting discussion between himself and a friend of his. To cut a long story short, his mother had convinced Centrelink, unemployment benefits in Australia, maybe elsewhere, I don't know, that he had a learning disability to claim more money. I forwarded this email archive along with his password to Centrelink. They probably couldn't directly access his email account due to red tape, however, I think someone must have done it off the books. A few weeks later at school, I heard that Bob's family was getting taken to court and being forced to pay back all the excess money that was claimed under false circumstances. I don't know how it ended up as I graduated before the case was settled, but I know they had to pay back several $1,000s at the least. Experience 7. When I was 7 or 8, I did a science project on the antibacterial efficacy of various soaps. Involved keeping hands dirty for a day, pressing grubby thumbs into petri dishes full of agar, and then washing and doing the same again. I'd take tracings of the cultures. Bigger colonies were bad, smaller ones good. This ended up winning the county science fair for my grade in a large metropolitan area, so that was nice. But before that, after I'd finished the experiments, but before I'd discarded the dishes, I got into a dispute with my parents, don't remember what about. I thought, I'll show them. So, I took the nastiest culture and swabbed it onto their bedroom doorknob. They both got sick as dogs, and I had to take care of them for a couple of days. Served me right. Experience 8. I read a story similar to mine a few years ago, but I don't remember where or even the circumstances, but here's mine. I was dating a girl about 8 years ago, and she got pregnant. She miscarried about a month in, and I decided that I wanted to get a vasectomy. She and I split up, and my next girlfriend and I were well into 3 years of dating when she got pregnant. I knew the baby wasn't mine because I didn't go to Filthy Pete's house of vasectomy and corner drugstore in Mexico to get the procedure done, so I was pretty safe in believing she cheated on me. About 7 months into the pregnancy, she started being an uber cunt of the highest degree, so we split up and she threatens to take me to court for child support. I tell her she can try, and after the baby is born, sure enough, I get a summons to court. I denied that the baby was mine and demanded a paternity test, and while we both were waiting, I informed her about my vasectomy before we even met. I got to give it to her. She held on to the lie that it was my child till the very end. But you should have seen the look on her face in the courtroom when the judge read out that I wasn't the father. Experience 9. I've posted this before but couldn't resist. My older brother, who was in high school and 1.5 feet taller at the time, threw me into the ceiling and let me drop to the floor. So, for the next year or so, I would wait until he would leave the house and go into his closet and pee in his shoes. I didn't tell him for around 20 years, but when I did, he said,
"You little bastard. I could never figure out why my feet always smelled so bad."
Experience 10. Too late to the thread, but this is a good story. Everyone has worked with someone they hated. I've never had a job where there wasn't someone who made my life miserable or whose very presence pissed me off. Usually, you just have to put up with them, but every once in a great while, you can get even. Dave was a dick. Stoop-shouldered, balding, in his 50s, Dave was a patronizing and irritating bastard. He'd been at IBM his whole career, had been making good money, and hated contractors. He thought they were bad for the company, that the only people worth a crap were regular employees, and he made it his priority to screw with all of us. Nothing overt, but constant subtle pressure was put on everyone whose badge said contractor on it. I think he developed this attitude from working with the guys from India, probably because they were so soft-spoken and accommodating, but maybe he was just a racist. I don't know, but whatever the reason, he took every opportunity to send us on little errands, wouldn't get back to us if we needed something, criticized anything we did, and generally made our lives hell in a way that couldn't be directly protested. I was pretty good friends with the guy sharing the room with him, another full-time employee, and one day Robert called me up.
Va. We're going for coffee.
Okay, let me just finish up a few things.
You don't understand. We need coffee now.
Right. I headed over to his office and he met me about halfway there. His eyes were shining with glee, but he wouldn't tell me what was going on until we had our coffee in the cafeteria. Once we finally had a table, he said,
Okay, Dave's a fetish wrestler.
Huh?
He's a fetish wrestler.
Dude, I've got nothing. WTF is a fetish wrestler? It turned out that there were men who paid women to wrestle them into submission. Some of them did it as a sort of hobby and others were extremely serious about it. Dave was one of the latter. Several times a year, he'd tell his wife he was meeting up with old army buddies but went to fetish wrestling conventions instead. They were highly organized, had rings set up for use, referees to score the matches, and everything. I never quite understood the need for refs, but hey, it's not my fetish. There were web pages devoted to the women who were available to wrestle, and Dave's favorite was a woman named Red Robin. She was a little tiny woman who was an absolute beast, and he paid her thousands of dollars every time he'd go to one of these conventions for her to wrestle him for about 20 minutes per match. We went back to my office and pulled up Red Robin's website. Why does he pay this woman to wrestle him? She's ugly as hell. Do they screw after? He says.
No.
Let me get this straight. Dave lies to his wife, flies out to California to have an ugly woman named Red Robin wrestle him into submission, pays her $400 per match, and doesn't screw her?
Yep.
Bullcrap. I went onto the main wrestling site and started reading Dave's posts. And there were a ton of them. He talked in great detail and depth about the sport, had invented his own move, called the Twisted Ostrich, and told stories about amazing matches he'd won and lost. Look, I'm all about people's private lives remaining private, and I probably wouldn't have done anything if he hadn't so consistently been an annoyance to me. But he had, so game on. I registered a fake account under the name Suplex on the wrestling website and started corresponding with him. I started by asking him some technical questions about the twisted ostrich, but it wasn't long until he started asking me personal questions. As time went by, I fleshed out the character, so within about a month he had become quite good friends with Miss Plex. I told him I was a late 20s single lawyer living in DC. My marriage had ended because my husband just didn't understand my interest in such a harmless sport. It was so nice to talk to someone like him who really understood me. It was unbelievably satisfying. Every time he'd send me on some stupid errand, I'd think of how he was confessing his private life to the character I'd created. Oh, and he lied his ass off. He dropped a good 10 years and his wife somehow. Finally, he asked for a picture. Well, I'd already downloaded a whole set of a girl who looked about that age, and the photos didn't look professional. I started with a simple one and he gushed about how hot I was. Over the next few weeks, I sent him more and more photos, each more revealing than the last, until the girl was fully nude, but didn't look posed. He started trying to be really sexy and started talking about how the best way to end a good wrestling match was with sex. Hold the phones. He told Robert that there wasn't any sex at the matches. I probed a bit and he finally admitted he had sex with the girls he wrestled. I freaking knew it. There were hookers working a special kind of crowd. It made more sense he was spending $400 per match. I amped up the sexy talk too, including wrestling into it. It was gold. He was hooked. His work slowed down, he became obsessed with suplex, and quite frankly, my work suffered as well, having to answer all his notes. Fortunately, he didn't notice because he was too busy sending off love letters. Now it was driving me nuts, because here was this creepy 50-ish guy who was still giving me a daily ration of crap, but was secretly having an online affair with a character I had created. Robert and I had a ton of fun screwing with the poor guy, but one day, he called me up again, war. Coffee. Now. At the cafeteria, he told me that Dave had another Army reunion coming up and we should see if we could get him to come to DC to meet Sue instead. Genius. I sent Dave an email and said we should get together sometime. Boom. In a flash, he responded that he had been thinking the same thing and had some time off in a few weeks. Would I be interested in him coming to visit? Yes. Yes, I would. As Sue, I arranged to meet him in DC at a local hotel. As the day approached, Dave became more and more excited and screwed with us less and less. He still tried, but the conviction and heat weren't there anymore. Robert and I were going nuts, having to act like nothing was going on while Dave prattled on about how happy he was to hook up with his old army buddies, what a fun trip it would be, how he was hoping he didn't get pinned down by the snow, etc. I guess he thought he was being clever, but since we already knew the entire story, it just came across as pathetic. He left early on a Friday to catch his flight, smiling like a champ. Tuesday morning, he showed up looking like his best friend had died. We asked what was wrong and he tried to play it off like he was just tired from his long weekend, but as soon as he could, he sent Sue a message asking what the hell had happened and why hadn't she shown up. We waited to respond until after lunch. He was a basket case. Finally, we fired back a furious message that we'd called his house on Friday just to leave him a message, and some woman answered. We said we'd pretended to give her a survey and we knew about his wife and 4 kids. So, he'd been lying to us all along. We went batshit crazy on him. We told him if he ever tried to contact us again, we'd tell his wife everything. We waited for him to get the email, watched him surreptitiously read it, and then we watched him have a meltdown. He started sweating like crazy, called his wife to check on her, and finally left early. He was never the same after that. He pretty much stopped messing with contractors and kept to himself. We never sent him any more emails, and he never sent any to Sue. My contract ended not too long after that, and that was the last I heard of him. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.